The subprime mortgage crisis that began in the early 2000s can be a very complicated issue to understand. But today, Lydia and I will be giving you a brief walkthrough on 3 eras of time that occurred during this crisis and who was affected by it so we can better understand it.
The price of a typical American house rose 124% in the course of 9 years between 1997 and 2006. And then 1 year later, in 1998, the Glass-Steagall legislation that separated regular banks from investment banks was repealed, and this gave the green light to all banks who were protected by the FDIC and the government to take more risks.
So we fast forward to the year 2000.
Why? 2K. Do.
That's right, Lydia. And after the dot-com bust in the year 2000, the Federal Reserve had set the new interest rate to just a little bit above what my grade is in this class, 1%, to stabilize the available money supply.
So how did this low interest rate impact investors, Max?
Well, the low interest rate impacted them quite a lot because a 1% interest rate is not something that any investor would be interested in, either you or me or them. So that's where our chart comes into play. So this means that the public demand of investing into homes rose. And this demand increases the interest rate on the mortgages. After this, investors thought that they could get a better return on their interest rate that homeowners paid on their mortgages, rather than those from the Federal Reserve. And that's what we see here. A rise in interest. MBS, mortgage-backed securities, financial agreements deriving their value from mortgage payments and housing prices. This is what increased greatly during the cheap credit and housing boom, which allowed financial institutions or foreign institutions to start investing into the U.S. housing market.
Collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs, structured asset-backed security where banks sell mortgages and distribute credit risk to investors. Credit rating agencies gave CDOs investment-grade ratings such as AAA to finance the housing boom, but they had not-so-great effects like conflict of interest, false information, and high risk. Because the 1% interest rate was making credit cheap, Wall Street used leverage to make profits.
Exactly. That captured the interest of the investors, who used the mortgages to profit from the homeowners. That's right. So brokers and lenders sold prime mortgages to those who met the criteria until the available pool of qualified potential homeowners ran out. These kinds of saving people don't last forever. So, in order to aid this issue, subprime mortgages were offered, as demonstrated in the following scenario. If it ain't subprime, go away. All right, come in.
I need a house.
All right, well, let's start with the basics, okay? What's your credit score?
Gee, I think it's like 550. Is that even good enough?
550. Actually making me get up out of my seat. 550 is perfect, okay? You've got potential. You see this sign up here? If it's subprime, that's just fine.
Yeah, it's just not really great right now. I'm a single mom. I'm raising like 3 little girls on my own, and like I just can't catch a break.
Sounds like potential. I mean, what's the job situation?
I'll also admit that things really aren't really great with the work situation. I recently got fired by this manager who is a complete jerk, and it was just such a bad situation that I'm not stepping foot in that store ever again, not even to like wrap up my tax business things or anything.
Sounds like you've got standards. So, what's your biggest motivation in getting a house?
I just really need a place of my own. My parents are sick of having the girls like over all the time and bugging them in their business, and they really just want us out of the house like as soon as possible. So I just need a place. I don't really care right now about the neighborhood or the history or like what the neighbors are like. I just need a place that's a good dirt cheap deal.
Dirt cheap? No. My sister's dirt cheap. You can do better than that. We're talking 1% interest rate, no down payment, 100% financing. I mean, what more do you want?
Oh wow, that sounds awesome. Perfect. Can you get me the mortgage now and let's just take care of it?
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, Mr. Lehman? Yeah, it's Maximilian worth $1 million. Yeah, hey. I just sold a super lucrative subprime mortgage to some lady who's got kids, work. Yup, you know how it is. Yup, doesn't know what she's doing. Yeah. Okay, hey. Let me be frank with you here. How much money are we talking? I mean, how much are we gonna exchange hands for this, So what we just saw was a very poor example of lending. And lending like this ended up making the house prices rise significantly and then soon after fall very steeply. So there was many repercussions and consequences as a result of this.
One of the consequences is that refinancing became more difficult. Another was that adjustable rate mortgages caused higher interest rates and higher monthly payments because they were reset. More mortgages defaulted and several million homes were foreclosed. The MBSs lost value, so investors reduced purchasing. Credit and economic growth around the world tightened up. Americans lost more than a quarter of their net worth, and $150 billion was withdrawn from USA money funds during 2 days in September 2008.
The Federal Reserve responded in 3 ways to the crisis. 1, they lowered the federal funds rate to 2% and the discount rate to 2.25%. They undertook open market operations to ensure the liquid flow of money, and they also purchased $750 billion of the government-sponsored enterprises mortgage-backed securities.
Also, in early 2011, the U.S. Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission found that the crisis was actually avoidable, and it found that the causes were widespread failures in financial regulation, and the Federal Reserve didn't do too much to stop the trend of poor mortgages. Also, too many financial firms took dramatic risks. Households and Wall Street both had a bad mix of excessive borrowing and risk, and key policymakers did not completely understand the various aspects of the financial situation, and they weren't prepared to handle what happened. Lastly, systematic accountability and ethics violations.
The Wall Street banks that had been using leverage several years before were now in very big trouble. Those that were deemed too big to fail were bailed out by the government's TARP program. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley are the only two that still survive in whole today. But the top two, Merrill Lynch went to Bank of America, and Bear Stearns went to JP Morgan Chase. Lehman Brothers are now extinct. Congress passed a stimulus package to lessen the effects on the economy, such as preserving and creating new jobs. Over here we have Representatives Dodd and Frank, who passed their act through Congress that is a little bit controversial because it has improvements for financial stability, but it has not so great effects on the economy.
So we hope that you better understand the causes and effects of the subprime mortgage crisis.
If you have any more questions, please refer to this list of references that we used, including the Crisis of Credit video that we saw in class.